Can you hear me? Is that okay? More this way? Okay. Okay, is that loud enough for everyone? Can you hear me? Okay, you come on this way. Okay. Yes, I need my clicker. Okay.
Thank you guys for being patient.
All right. Is that loud? Can you hear me? Okay, last test. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah, okay. Okay, I will try and talk louder. I am so excited to be here today. I'm thrilled that they asked me to come present this information. I'm really passionate about women having the information they need postpartum. I'll give you a little background on me. I think we might switch this so you don't have that annoying noise the whole time. Okay. All right, that is better. Awesome. Okay, so I have a master's degree of social work from the University of Utah. I started my career in medical social work, working in the hospital, and have transitioned to therapy. I worked at the Healing Group, where I got excellent mentorship on treating postpartum women, and in 2017, I started my own practice in Lehigh. And I recently got certified PMH-C, which means Perinatal Mental Health Certified. It's the only certification for psychotherapy and treating postpartum women through Postpartum Support International. My practice is in Lehigh. I also see couples and just other people with relationship or anxiety and depression issues. And then I live in Lehigh with my husband and 3 kids. And I just want to say there may be some difficult information covered today. If you want to get up and take a break, and take care of yourself, please feel free to do so. Okay, so why a revolution? I love that this conference is called a revolution. For far too long, women's health has taken a back seat, truly. And so I think it is kind of revolutionary that we're all here learning about this postpartum period, gaining the education that we need. I have a quote I'm going to read from Jessica Gross. She's a reporter for the New York Times in their parenting section. And what surprised me about this quote is not what is said, but the year that it was said in. So this quote says, "There are major gaps in knowledge about women's health and women's bodies. Many of the experts I spoke with mentioned that we're just now starting to care about the health of the mother as much as the health of the fetus, as vital to the overall health of the pregnancy." And I wish I could tell you this quote was from like 20 or 30 years ago, but that was from this year, 2019, where the experts that she spoke with say, we're just now starting to care about the health of the mother as much. So, hence the revolution, right? There's another great resource, a book that's called The Birth of a Mother, that talks about not really the physical transition, but the psychological transition to becoming a mother. This quote says, "A mother has to be born psychologically as much as her baby is born physically. What a woman gives birth to in her mind is not a new human being, but a new identity, the sense of being a mother." And I think that is something that we don't really talk about. It just happens for all of us that have become mothers. But there's really a lot of mental and emotional labor that goes into forming our motherhood identity and how we see ourselves as a mother. And I'm glad that as a society we are learning new ways to talk about this transition to motherhood, how to talk about it with each other. And actually, to do that, it's helpful to go back to adolescence. So I would love for you to shout out some words that describe adolescence.
Terrible.
Awkward, terrible.
Puberty.
Puberty, hormonal, It's kind of crazy, messy, right? Yes, it's like an awkward stage. And so there's this idea that motherhood, this transition, should be called matrescence, because similar to adolescence, it is this huge life shift, right? We have hormone issues, our body changes. There is a psychiatrist named Alexandra Sachs, and she works with a lot of postpartum women. And she said many women were coming to her, but they weren't really sick, like they didn't have depression or anxiety, but they felt bad. And she says this idea of matrescence is really helpful if we view it as this transition. She gave a TED talk about this idea that you can look up, and she found that in the 70s, an anthropologist named Dana Raphael had coined this term, and she's kind of popularized it again. She talks about how matrescence is a push and pull, like it's this zoom in on our baby. Our baby demands really our complete focus, but then sometimes zoom out and we're like, well, what about this part of my life, this part of my life, and this part? So that transition between the two can be really hard and really difficult and something we may not expect. A quote from her TED Talk says, "Your hormones go nuts, your hair and skin don't behave the way you like, and you develop a new relationship with your body that seems to have a mind of its own. The difference? Everyone understands that adolescence is an awkward phase, but during matrescence, people expect you to be happy while losing control over the way you look and feel." So how does this idea of matrescence help us? It may help us set more realistic expectations for our transition to motherhood, recognize that it's a process and not always a glowy, happy, shiny one. And not only that, it's such a public transition. Strangers sometimes feel free to say things or touch us, and that can be really awkward. And I think during my own matrescence, I just realized how vulnerable I felt physically and emotionally, and that was really uncomfortable for me to recognize. Adolescents have several years to assimilate these changes, right, when we go through this, but pregnant women have only a few short months to deal with their changing body, their changing emotions, and their changing identity, really. I've also heard motherhood described as a normal crisis. Sometimes psychologists refer to major life events as these normal crises, and that's maybe also a helpful way to think about it. It can be normal, it's a developmental stage, but it doesn't always feel natural to us, and it gives us a time to really rework our own identity. Another way that matrescence can help us is viewing it as a time of receiving. There's a quote up here that says, "In our lives, we have seasons of giving and seasons of receiving. As a new mom, you are in a season of receiving," which can be difficult sometimes. The way this impacts each new mom can be different, depending on how comfortable we are with receiving, how comfortable the people around us are with giving, depending on our culture, our family culture. Hazmeen's going to talk more about other cultures and how they do this postpartum time. I think it's just important to recognize we can't keep giving at the same pace that we were giving before. It really forces us to slow down, and that's okay. We have to learn how to embrace that, basically, the slowing down there. Okay, so postpartum, as we've been discussing, is this time of huge upheaval and change in our lives. Awesome changes, maybe terrible changes, but I'm going to go through some of these changes here. Focus on forming an attachment with baby, sleep deprivation, loss of freedom, hormonal changes, learning new skills, role transitions, creating and learning to rely on a support system, physical healing, change in our body image, possible financial stress, insecurities about parenting abilities, and on and on and on, right? So all that to say, with all these changes, I think postpartum is such an important time to practice self-compassion. I don't know if you've heard of this idea before, but I love talking about self-compassion, and I think it's so essential for all of us, especially after we become mothers. So what is self-compassion? Let's start with a scenario. Say you're going to visit a friend, maybe she's just had a baby, you're bringing her some food, You notice her sink is full of dishes, her 2-year-old's only wearing a diaper and some Princess Sophia high heels. She looks kind of like a mess, maybe she hasn't showered, she's got bags under her eyes. So you say to her, like, your house is a mess. Why haven't you cleaned up around here? It looks really terrible. You look terrible. Remember when you used to look so good? Okay, we're not going to say that to our friend, right? But how many times do we say those things to ourselves? I think is an important thing to consider. We're lots of times our own worst critic, and we do say really mean things to ourselves. So it's just important to remember to talk to ourselves as we would talk to a good friend. Next, I have a tool that I use sometimes with my clients. It's called a feelings wheel. Here in the center are the 6 main emotions that we feel: sadness, happiness, surprise, fear, anger, and disgust. And from there it branches out to different specific feeling words that may be under the umbrella of those words. And sometimes naming and identifying our feelings can be so helpful. Sometimes when we're upset, to put a specific name or idea on what we're going through is really comforting and maybe all the intervention that we need. And it wouldn't make sense, given the complete upheaval and change that new motherhood is, that we would only experience feelings from one piece of the pie up here. I have highlighted, this is like the happy part, so we're not going to have this one slice. We're going to have feelings from the whole wheel, of course, and I think it's important to consider that. A phrase I really like to use is, I give myself permission to fill in the blank. Whatever we're feeling is okay, and to remember there are no good emotions or bad emotions. When I've had babies, I'm always excited to go back to work, and sometimes guilty or upset, but a big part of motherhood, I think, is just learning to hold those 2 opposite emotions, and to recognize, like I said, it's not good or bad to feel however you are feeling. It is okay. And to recognize that is really important, to embrace our real motherhood, to be real for ourselves, real for our friends. You can't really see this, but this is a very real picture of me. I had just changed my baby's diaper. This realness was captured by my 3-year-old a few years ago with a phone camera, as 3-year-olds tend to do. And I had just changed my baby's diaper. It was rubbing my face. This was much earlier than I had intended to start my day. And when I saw this picture, I just cracked up and thought, that is real motherhood, where I'm like summoning the inner fortitude I need to continue with another day. So I think part of this revolution that we're learning and getting better at is just recognizing real motherhood for what it is and sharing that for ourselves and for our friends. Okay, how many women are impacted by a mental health issue? Sometimes if our transition to motherhood goes beyond matrescence, we're going to talk about different disorders, as we call them, different issues that can come up. So 80% of women are affected by baby blues, depression and anxiety is between 10 to 25%, PTSD and OCD are 3 to 5%, and psychosis is 1 to 2 out of every 1,000 moms. And I'm going to go over and review what those mean. Okay, so risk factors for developing a depression or anxiety postpartum or during pregnancy. Women who are sensitive to birth control or hormonal birth control, that can, I see some of you, yes. I was sensitive to that as well. That can be an issue if you were taking hormonal birth control and had a mood reaction or felt different. If you have a history of sleep issues, if you have a family history of mental health issues, or the biggest one's probably a personal history of mental health issues. And it can even, our way of thinking can be affected. If we have really perfectionistic tendencies or extremely high expectations for ourselves, if we have a predisposition to worry, if we ruminate, if we're prone to that, we can be at risk. If we have trauma, or other major stressors, job loss, death, divorce in the postpartum period, it's really stressful. And how many of us move while we're pregnant? And that's really a huge stressful life change. And then sometimes it's none of these things that we can really point to. We can still develop a mood issue postpartum, or depression or anxiety, and know that that is common too. Okay, some groups at risk. Adoptive parents are actually at risk too. There's what's called post-adoption depressive syndrome. Military parents are at higher risk, both women who have served in the military and if their spouse has served in the military. That's a stressor. Parents of multiples report higher rates of postpartum depression. Teen parents, in one study they found that 50% of teen parents had postpartum depression. And then people who have struggled with infertility can also be at risk. And people who have stillbirth or miscarriage can also be at risk. And sometimes we don't realize that, but they still have a postpartum body and still have postpartum mood issues sometimes. And also thyroid issues can affect 10-15% of postpartum women, and so that can mimic a mood disorder with fatigue and low energy, so that's also something to be aware of and talk with providers about. NICU parents are also at increased risk for depression and anxiety. I've never had a baby in the NICU, but what a stressful time it is for so many people. Studies that I've read have shown that the perceived support in the NICU has a lot to do with how the parents experience it, especially around breastfeeding. Excuse me. The higher the support around breastfeeding, the less likelihood of developing depression or anxiety in the NICU. And then how many women who have given birth have noticed a change in your partner's mood after you've given birth? Because it's a huge change for men as well. So that can also, postpartum depression can affect men, and right now we believe that about 1 in 10 men have postpartum depression, but it's probably more than that, maybe, I don't know, it's underreported. But I like this quote up here. It says, "It took time to make people recognize postpartum depression for women that should be happy new mothers, and it will take time also to make people recognize that strong men can be depressed after childbirth." And I think things are getting a little better that way, but men do face a lot of stigma when talking about mental health issues, so watch out for yourselves or for your partners. Okay, moving on to the baby blues. I don't know if you can see this picture, but this new mom has her nice undies on and she has a new baby. And I remember thinking after my first baby, wow, I didn't know my body could do so many strange and amazing and weird but wonderful things. So it's definitely an adjustment, and 80% of women go through what we call the baby blues. And this just means your mood can be up and down. You might be teary, but you also are happy as well. You can have loss of sleep, fatigue, irritability. But this really only lasts up to 2 weeks after giving birth. And it will resolve on its own. It doesn't need any intervention. And a big reason that this may occur is because of hormones. The next chart here shows hormones. You can see estrogen and progesterone here. The arrow is birth, and so, wow, those drop off really quick, right? So just know there are so many changes going on, and that can account for part of why our mood can be so up and down during the first 2 weeks postpartum. This next slide, Jatev is going to talk more about breastfeeding, but we know oxytocin surges during breastfeeding, so there are hormone changes there as well. And then this chart just shows our hormones change and are in flux throughout our whole life, and postpartum is just a part of that. So hormones, they're a big deal, and they can account for a lot of why we feel the way that we do. Okay, this next chart shows that we used to think that postpartum and pregnancy would be like a protective time for women. If they'd had a mental health issue, that this would be a good thing for them. They would feel better, but we know that is not the case. It's actually a high-risk time for people. This graph shows admissions to a psychiatric hospital, the months leading up to childbirth, and this is 1 month after childbirth for first-time admissions. And then the second part shows a recurrent admission to a psychiatric hospital. So just to illustrate, yes, this is a high-risk time when you need to watch for your mental health and, watch out for your friends. Okay, the next part, I wanted to talk about the difference between pregnancy and depression. Sometimes it can seem like they overlap and it's hard to tell what's going on. So let's talk about mood. In pregnancy, you can have ups and downs in your mood, maybe more than you're used to, but you'll still feel like yourself and still feel pretty normal, I guess. But with depression, your mood is going to be more consistently down, more consistently sad and gloomy. Self-esteem. In pregnancy, self-esteem will remain fairly normal. And in depression, you can have loss of self-esteem, feelings of guilt, feelings of guilt and shame that way. Sleep in pregnancy may be interrupted, it may be harder to sleep. Your bladder's getting kicked and you're uncomfortable and all that, but you can usually go back to sleep. And with depression, you may have sleep issues, find it hard to go to sleep, hard to fall asleep, or get back to sleep. And then you may have suicidal thoughts with depression, not in regular pregnancy. Worry, you'll have some normal worry in pregnancy, but in depression or anxiety, it's just going to feel overwhelming to you and feel way more than you're used to. And then with pregnancy, you have joy and anticipation, and that may be dampened if you're having depression or anxiety. And last, energy. It's normal to have changes in your energy in pregnancy, but with rest, you'll probably feel better. And with depression, you may just have this lack of energy and feel like you can't ever get back to a normal level. Okay, so postpartum depression. It's been called the smiling depression because women are really good at, going on with the show even though they're struggling inside. So this is something to watch out for. So this would be after 2 weeks after giving birth, we would say it's a postpartum depression. Symptoms are sadness, crying, unexplained physical complaints, backaches, stomach aches, poor concentration or focus, feelings of overwhelm, loss of interest, wanting to isolate. I think a good way to describe it is you don't feel like yourself. You say, this doesn't feel like me. And then 3 that I really want to highlight are anger, irritability, and guilt that can be a lot more prevalent, I think, in postpartum depression. And sometimes we feel like anger is our personal failing, or I'm just like a bad person now, I'm a bad mom, but we really have to consider that anger can be a symptom of what's going on for us. So to be aware of that. It's also been said that the opposite of depression is not happiness, the opposite is vitality. And that's another clue to yourself. If you feel like you've lost the same vitality for life that you had, that's another way to clue into this. Okay, postpartum anxiety is called the hidden disorder. Kind of similarly, sometimes when we're anxious, we just feel out of control. We feel this loss of control, and we do everything we can on the outside to look great. We have dinner on the table every night. All the kids look great. We get up and do our hair and makeup, but we may just feel really bad and really out of control on the inside. Symptoms include agitation, irritability, hypervigilance, sleep disturbance, racing thoughts, constant worry, heart palpitations, shortness of breath. It may even be things like we don't want other people to hold our baby, just preoccupation with our baby's health, like checking on the baby more than maybe we feel like is normal or other people comment to us. And not wanting to be alone with your baby. Someone experienced that as part of a mood or anxiety disorder. Okay, postpartum panic disorder. Some women can experience panic attacks after giving birth, where you might have hyperventilation, shortness of breath, rapid breathing, dizziness, excessive fear. Sometimes when that happens, your fingers can go numb and tingly. And this is anecdotal based on my own research, but I think for a lot of women, these panic attacks can be triggered by thoughts of, I'm a bad mom, I've ruined my kids, everything, I've ruined everything, and I think that can really bring on panic for some women. So panic attacks are something that occur for some women. Okay, postpartum OCD, obsessions and compulsions. Again, this is around 3-ish to 5% of postpartum women, but postpartum women are at 1.5 to 2 times greater risk than the general population of having OCD, so it's kind of a high risk time for that. Symptoms meaning obsessions, just sometimes we call those sticky thoughts that we cannot get out of our brain, that meaning they don't feel good to us, like we don't want to think about that thing, but it keeps coming into our brain. And then compulsions, things that we may do to alleviate that. Kind of the classic OCD is germs and hand washing, but I think that's, for postpartum women, it can manifest really differently, and it may be, we don't catch it as much, because every new mom checks on her baby. Sometimes it may be more, or sometimes we may feel like this compulsion or obsession to go check on the baby. Also, sometimes we have what are called intrusive thoughts, and those can be scary thoughts. And a lot of new parents experience intrusive thoughts, and it sometimes is in conjunction with anxiety or OCD, and sometimes it just occurs for new parents. Thoughts of harm coming to your baby, like really scary thoughts. I experienced intrusive thoughts after the births of one of my babies, and luckily I had this training and I knew what was going on for me, and my next thought was, oh wow, I just had an intrusive thought. That's what that was. And it was still scary and still really hard. So if you're having this, talk to someone about it. That is the key, is just to let someone know what's going on for you. And if you're feeling, worried or scared about it, that's a good sign. And so it's just helpful to talk to a provider about that. And I think it's even more reason to practice self-compassion, to go easy on yourself, to say, what stressors can I eliminate from my life right now, if you're experiencing that. Okay, we're almost through all the heavy stuff. PTSD can occur for some women. We have a saying in the birth world that trauma is in the eye of the beholder. And birth can be traumatic for some women. A lot of themes that postpartum women report are lack of support from staff when they're giving birth, feelings of betrayal. Symptoms can include re-experiencing a traumatic event through flashbacks, avoiding negative triggers. You might avoid driving by the hospital if it reminds you of your birth, just feeling that hypervigilance, feeling on edge. And PTSD is just something to be aware of. We don't like to think that birth can be traumatic, but it can be for some women. Okay, and then postpartum psychosis. Again, this happens in 1 to 2 out of 1,000 births. And this is where a woman may experience delusions or hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't there, believing things that aren't true about herself or her baby sometimes. And this is where you would want to go to the ER quickly to take care of this. It usually happens 2 weeks to a month after giving birth, but I've heard of cases that have been longer. You may notice someone that has rapid speech, speaking really fastly, just strange ideas, kind of all over the place. And in that case, you would want to go seek help immediately. Women with untreated bipolar disorder meaning high highs and low lows, fluctuating through those for several days at a time, they can be a high risk for postpartum psychosis. So if there's a history of that in your family, it's just good to be aware of that. Okay, and then a note on breastfeeding and mental health. I have a quote here by Brooke Shields. She's spoken a lot about her experience with postpartum depression. She said, "If I were to eliminate breastfeeding, I might have no hope of coming through the nightmare. I was hanging on to breastfeeding as my life of strength for them." And studies have shown that women can experience anxiety and depression when they're weaning their baby, even if they didn't have it earlier. But I've also talked to other women that felt their anxiety or depression got better when they stopped breastfeeding. I just think it has everything to do with your relationship to breastfeeding. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it working? Do you have to pump all the time? I want some research on pumping because it can be really a big stressor for a lot of women. So that is also something to note, is breastfeeding and mental health. Okay, these are very treatable. And I didn't explain this, but we call them postpartum and anxiety disorders, PMADs for short, or perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And perinatal meaning pregnancy up to 1 year after giving birth. So let's go through the ways that these are treated. And one way I like to think of it is, after becoming a mom, you may not feel like your old self again, but you will feel like yourself again. And as vague as that is, I think it can be a benchmark for recoveries if you feel like yourself again. We can't talk about treatment without talking about how essential sleep is. I went to a conference where they said, we used to think that the 3 pillars of health were sleep, nutrition, and exercise, and now they say that's not true. We know sleep is the foundation, and sleep is just such an important part of recovery, and when we have new babies waking us up, it's very hard to get that sleep. So lack of sleep issues doesn't cause a mood or anxiety disorder, but if you're not getting enough sleep, it can really make your symptoms worse and make you feel worse. So a lot of times I will brainstorm with clients how to get better sleep. What does that look like? Asking your family for more help, hiring a postpartum doula, which I think is a fantastic thing to do. Just make sure that you get the sleep that you need, because it's so important for your health. Okay, next is talk therapy, and that's what I do. I meet with clients usually once a week, and a lot of what we do is called cognitive behavioral therapy. Like it's outlined up here, thoughts create feelings, feelings create behavior, behavior reinforces thoughts, and around we go. And it's really helpful to recognize the thoughts that we're having and how they contribute to the way that we're feeling. So I work with clients on identifying that. If you go to therapy, it should be with someone that you trust, someone that you feel safe with, and it should be someone that has training in postpartum mood issues. What we talk about in therapy, we cover a lot of things really. We talk about your changing identity, checking expectations, reducing perfectionism and comparison, communication and conflict resolution. I usually have women's partner come in for at least 1 or more sessions because they can really be an essential part of your healing, and they need to know what's going on with you. We talk about anger, management, and grief resolution. Again, anger is one of those things that we don't want to experience usually, and if we do, grief is going to be there. And if you're experiencing depression or anxiety or any of these things, you probably have grief in your postpartum journey because it's not really what you would choose. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a long course of therapy. You don't need to come for a long time. Someone will come for a few months and feel in a much better place and have more skills and tools that they need. Medication is a great tool that we have that's so helpful for a lot of women. I think what's important to consider is, do the risks outweigh the benefits? And if you have an untreated anxiety or depression, you're going to have risks. And if you have medication, there may be risks with that, but it's just so important to educate yourself and talk to your provider about that. And SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are some of the most commonly prescribed antidepressants in pregnancy. And they've done studies that show there's no malformations or abnormalities with that. They are the most studied drug in pregnancy. So again, just something that you can consider and can talk about with your provider, because if you're pregnant even and having a really deep depression and are experiencing suicidal thoughts, it's a valid treatment option. Okay, support groups. Support groups are magical. I think they are really, really essential and really important for healing. There's that quote by C.S. Lewis that says, "A friend is born when one person says to the other, 'What, you too? I thought I was the only one.'" And support groups are a great place for making those connections. And we're lucky to have several support groups here in this area that PSI is here, and you can find out the dates and times of those. And if you're not local, Postpartum Support International can hook you up with groups in your area. And there was a study that even after only attending a support group for 4 to 6 weeks, women reported lower rates of depression. So again, it's not like it's a long thing that you need to commit to, but it can be really helpful. Okay, intensive outpatient treatment. This is another great option that we do have here locally as well, where you may go to therapy for several times a day, or for several days a week, for several hours at a time, just a little bit more intensive. And this can be a great option if you need more support. And then a step up from that would be an inpatient if you're having a psychosis or an extreme anxiety that needs to be managed. That can be a good option too. Okay, we're going to talk about a few other things that are helpful. Meditation is really helpful. It's really hard to start a meditation practice when you have an infant or kids in general. I know, I've been preaching it for years and have finally started myself. But I have found even like 5 minutes a day can be very, very helpful. So start now, start wherever you are. Do it with your kids if you need to. But it can be a great way to reduce our stress, help quiet our brains. There's a study that women who did 12 weeks of yoga and massage reported lower rates of depression. And there was another study where women just had their partners give them a massage, and they reported lower rates of depression and higher or increased relationship satisfaction. So if you need a reason for your partner to give you a massage, you can go home and tell them it's science. You need a massage. Again, this is really helpful when we're talking about anything really, but this is stages of healing or recovery. This line up here is the expectation, the dotted line. We think recovery is just going to be smooth sailing sometimes, but really you've probably seen something similar on Pinterest where we know it's just ups and downs, and it's really true. PSI has a list of these stages, and the first one is acute symptoms, then initial resolution, and their third stage is called the first slump. And I pull this out with clients sometimes. I had a client recently who came to me, started medication, was doing a lot of great work in therapy, working with her partner through things, and but she was like, "Why don't I feel better yet?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm in the first slump right now, huh?" And I was like, "Yes, probably." So it's just helpful to note that it's not, recovery can look different for everyone, and it can go through stages, but there are amazing tools out there to help us. The last stages for Postpartum Support International's recovery guidelines are grieving and finding meaning, and I think that can come a lot later for women. I think that's why a lot of women get involved in things like this, right? Is that finding meaning if you had a difficult postpartum, is how to support others and how to reach out. This is a great thing you'll have to review in the slides, but it's called the Well Mom Checklist, and it's a way to make sure you are taking care of yourself, because whenever a new baby is born, a new mom is born, whether it's your first baby or your fifth. And these are great questions you can hang on your fridge. PSI has a similar handout of things that are just good ways to check in with yourself. Make sure you're taking the time to mother yourself. Like, have I laughed today? Have I eaten enough nutritious food? Should I go on a 10-minute walk today? Will that help me feel better? Just, not even if you're having depression or anxiety, I think they're great anytime really, just to check in with our mental health. I want to highlight a few things going on here in Utah. The Emily Effect is a nonprofit. On their website, they have stories of postpartum women. If you want to go read different women's experiences, it can be difficult to read, but it is a great resource if you're wanting to know more. And then Rising Phoenix podcast, also they are here local and they share stories of women with postpartum mood issues that can be really helpful. And then PSI Utah is a great way to connect women with resources if you need to find a support group or find a therapist or need more information. And then this, which you can't see here, is called the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, the EPDS, and it's an assessment tool that we use. You can go take it online. It's linked on my website, and you can just Google it. It's called the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale. And if your score is concerning, that's another reason that you should seek help or talk to someone about it. Even if your score is not concerning you, it's never a bad idea to reach out and get some help or talk to someone. Okay, so there are a lot of great things going on, but I think there is more that we can do for sure. I want to highlight some stats here. So gestational hypertension happens in about 6 to 8% of pregnancies, same with preeclampsia, and gestational diabetes is about 6%, and yet everyone has to go drink that drink and get their blood drawn, but it only affects 6% of us. And PMADs, these mood and anxiety disorders, are around 20%, so we really should start screening for those. When I had my first baby, I don't think I really had any providers ask me about this, but by my third, a couple years ago, I had several staff people in the hospital ask me about this, and it was really great. And they were so helpful, and I said, oh, I know about this, I treat this, and they're like, well, yeah, sometimes people that treat it need the extra help, and I was like, thank you, I really appreciate that. So I think it's just so, we can't talk about it enough, really. We just need to be aware of it. And PSI recommends screening so often. I'm going to just read this so you know how often they recommend. At the first prenatal visit, once in the second trimester, once in the third trimester, at the 6-week OB visit, the 3-month pediatric visit, the 6-month OB visit, and a 12-month pediatric visit. So they recommend all screening all the time, and I love that they're recommending pediatricians, even like librarians, anyone that comes into contact with new moms should know about this information. Okay, and then in your workbook, I created a little check-in sheet. This is kind of just a guide for you to check in with yourself. What did I do right today? This is so, I go through this. I'm not newly postpartum, but sometimes I'm like, I need to focus on what I did right today, because it's difficult to remember. Our brains latch onto the negative a lot of the time. So checking in, what did I do right today? What stressors did I have today? Can I reframe any negative thoughts that I had today? Did I feel like myself today? And then would I tell a friend in my situation to reach out for help? And then to list these people, right now. Know who you will call if you need help. And then a little checklist here that just highlights different ways to take care of ourselves and what to do if you realize that you are struggling, so you can have some forethought on what you want to do that way. And I just wanted to help you be an observer of your thoughts and create some space between yourself and what's going on for you, so you have a way to recognize that. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you so much for listening and being here. Questions? Okay, we have time for some questions, I guess. Does anyone have questions?